Hey, what's up guys? My name is Moda and welcome back to the Mining Stacker YouTube channel. Today's video, we do have another new little mini ASIC miner. This is from IbeLink again. This is the N3 Mini. This is going to be for CKB, so for Nervos network, right? So we do have the price, we do have the specs. We're going to compare it against the competition. We're going to compare it against the other mini release that just came out recently, just to see if you're in the market, which one is more worth it, right? So we're going to do those comparisons. We're going to talk about it. See if this thing is worth looking at, right? So if that sounds good, guys, stay tuned, all right? So let's get to this thing. So before we get started, I do want to harp on one glaring fact, especially when we're looking at the profitability, is CKB does have a halving coming up. So this is a huge glaring thing and something you really got to research when you're looking at any ASICs. I know usually our first step is go and mine the ASIC, look at the profitable ones. Okay, that one looks good. Price looks good. I dive into the project a bit. There's some hype there, looking good there. This is the other big thing you really got to focus on, and it's the tokenomics and the emission schedule of that coin, right? Because that will have a huge impact on your profitability, right? Especially depending on your time frame that you plan on owning this thing, right? In this case, it is coming up immediately. It is in 48 days. It is a full halving, meaning that your yield will get cut in half, right? So factor that in when we're looking at profitability and such. And just something to think about when you're looking at any ASICs, right? This is something you really got to factor in, really got to think about, right? Especially with CKB miners, because again, on that Eagle Song algorithm, that is the only coin you can mine on these things, right? Some of the other coins, you have options. In this particular case, especially with the ASICs, it's just CKB, right? So please take that into consideration, all right? So let's look at this thing. So IbeLink did not do a dedicated post to it, right? Kind of like with the K3 Mini, they did do a dedicated post, kind of showing pictures, had a link to it from their website. This one, they were lazy. They just reposted Mind the ASICs tweets, right? Which just showed profitability and such. So that was kind of weird right off the bat. But as we go on their website, let's look at it. So key stats, $208. So a little bit cheaper than the K3 Mini. K3 is like $238. A little bit cheaper, kind of in line with the N3 and the K3, right? The N3 was cheaper overall than the K3. Just overall, Cadena tends to be more popular. Let's look at the specs now, though. 1.8 terahash, 295 watts. In full power mode. It does have a low power mode, 1.3 terahash, 185 watts. Let's compare it to the competition, which in this case is the Goldshell, the CK Box 2, right? So in full hash rate mode, the CK Box 2 is actually having more power. It's coming in at 2.1 terahash, again, versus the 1.8 over there, but also at more power, and this is where the difference is. So this guy's coming in at 400 watts versus the other guy at 295, about 300 watts, right? So efficiency. 190 joules a terahash, right, in full hash rate mode for the Goldshell. And in comparing it with the N3, it is 163 joules a terahash. So it's an upgrade. It is more efficient, not by much. It's only 15%, right? It's a little, not a little, it's very disappointing, right? At least with the K3 Mini, could almost call it like a generational jump because it was about a 30% increase, right? Which is a pretty good difference. Only 15%, right? Now let's look at it in the low power mode. Maybe we're a little bit better off here. So low power mode for the Goldshell, 1.54, which again is more than the N3 at 260 watts, 168 joules a terahash, okay? Comparing it with the low power mode on the N3, 1.3 terahash, so again, it is less. 142 joules a terahash, so about a 16% difference, right? So again, pretty much the same thing, right? Less overall power and only a 15-16% increase in efficiency. When comparing it with the Goldshell, which again released earlier this year, at the beginning of this year, this one seemed like it was going to have more potential, but it does not, right? If anything, if you're on the market for one of these mini things, the K3 is definitely the better look, only because at least it's a more significant upgrade to the Goldshell, right? At least at that point, it's a 30% increase, right? Although, the other thing you got to factor is just the price points, right? The Goldshells are still in that $200 range, and this guy is in the $200 range also. Do I really see Goldshell lowering the price to $100, $150? No. Maybe on the used market you'll be able to see them for that much, but realistically, this is going to be the lows. So the better overall buy, if you're into this thing, would be the IbeLinks, right? Whether it's the N3, the K3, just because, again, they are more efficient, although in this case, not by much. Another huge negative against this thing is the halving, right? Which isn't necessarily a knock against the ASIC itself, but it's just the fact that it's mining that coin, right? Out of your options, because of, number one, it's only a 15% increase in efficiency. It also has a halving coming in 48 days, right? So if we look at the profitability, not looking great. At a 10-cent kilowatt hour, you had a 20-cent loss currently as it is right now for the low power mode, right? But again, factor in, your income is going to go from 24 cents down to 12 cents. And this thing is going to cost 44 cents a day to power this thing, right? If the price action were to stay the same, which again, as we've seen with previously with these other projects having their halving in this bear market, had little to no effect, and in some cases had a negative effect on price, right? So factor that in, that just because you hear halving, oh, we're going to go up. No, again, the only one that really matters is the BTC halving. Once we're in the bull market, once we're in the full swing of things, then we'll begin to see the effects of this halving, right? Because the emissions is getting reduced by half. But until then, it ain't going to be fun, right? So if we look at the profitability in full hash mode, kind of gets even more bleak, right? It's currently at a 37-cent a day loss at a 10-cent kilowatt hour. Again, your yield would go from 34 down to 17 cents, and then it's going to cost 71 cents a day to run this thing, right? So it's not looking good by any means, right? I know you guys already know how I feel about the form factor, but just looking at the numbers, looking at the data, looking at the prospects, it makes 0 sense, right? At this point, if you're into CKB and you cannot do 240 volt, maybe you're in an apartment, in a condo, something of that sort, even then I would still just buy the coin instead, right? Unless you do not care about profitability, you want to just decentralize the network, and in that case I get it. This is going to be your best bet. At $200, in reality it's not much of a thing, right? But just keep in mind that people a lot of times will buy these things in anticipation. Oh yeah, it's $200 now, but come the bull market, I'll be able to flip this thing for $1,000. I want to pump your brakes a little bit on that, only because it is so much weaker than the competition, right? Again, you would need, if we compare it to the K7, you would need 35 of these things to equal one K7, right? And then factor in that the K7 currently is only $2,400, right? So you would have to buy $7,000 worth of these things to equal one K7 that's only $2,400. So it would be like buying 12 of those things, right? So it's just, there's such a discrepancy in the amount of power that it just doesn't make sense. And not only the amount of power, but then the efficiency on top of that. It's one thing if it's to scale, meaning it's just as efficient, just obviously only a fraction amount of chips, then it could make sense, right? But in this case, kind of similar with what we're seeing with Casper, where the KS0 is on scale. Obviously, it's a lot smaller and it's a fraction of what the big guys are, but at least the efficiency is on scale, right? So then at that point, if we do have positive price action, even come a while later, you can see potential for it to be worth something, right? So in this case, it's such older tech that's so much more inefficient that I don't see that potentially happening, especially consider the fact also, guys, that we may have yet another gen increase come this spring, summer, right? Who's to say that Goldshell doesn't release a version that is actually on par with this thing, right? That is in that same mini little form factor, right? So you have to factor that potential in as well. If we were closer to the bull market, then yes, it could make sense, right? If we were a year from now, let's say, instead of being October 23, maybe we're August of 24, right? At that point, we're kind of getting close. Then at that point, I could see the potential, because at that point, we're relatively close, right? we could already be able to foresee what hardware would be coming out. But right now we're still so far away. There's a good chance that we may see another generation of these little mini things come out prior to then, right? When we could still be in this downtrend and they still may be potentially cheap, right? So I would personally wait just because of that reason alone. I would instead invest those $200 into just buying CKB and then just staking that thing on the Neural wallet, right? To me, that would be the better play, right? I mean, I know I get it. Some of you guys really want to participate. You want to do this thing. You don't only do 120 volt. If anything, I would be looking at the K of zeros, right? I mean, it's just, at least there's potential there, right? With these guys, I don't see it, right? Again, hopefully maybe sometime next year we get something that is on scale with these, but until then, there's no way I would purchase one. Again, everybody's situation is different. Their outlook is different. The reason they are mining is different. Again, mine is not purely, but mostly for profitability, right? Especially with these heavier ASICs, right? And again, you're going to be stuck with that algorithm. So it's something you do have to be wise with it, right? I mean, I get it. It's only $200, but at the end of the day, it's like you could just invest those $200 towards purchasing CKB or put it towards saving up for one of these things, right? So different things to factor in, different things to think about. But overall, if you're into these little mini things, this is potentially the worst out of the bunch, right? A lot of factors going against it. It is not much of an upgrade. Some things to think about, guys. I get it. I know a lot of you guys like these things, but you got to look at the reality. You got to look at the numbers, right? Everybody can feel some sort of way about these things, but in reality, look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Run your numbers, run your calculations, run what you think will happen, and then see if it makes sense. And that's how I come to the conclusion, right? It's kind of annoying when people go on like Monday and say, oh, it's not profitable, it's garbage. Explain why. Explain why you think that. Explain why you see that. That way it can make sense, right? That way, because at the end of the day, that way you can come up with your conclusion, right? That because at the end of the day, that's the one that matters, right? I can think what I think, other people can think what they think, but at the end of the day, you're the one spending the money, you're the one that needs to do the research, you're the one that needs to come up with your conclusion, right? Do your research, take all these factors into consideration, and come up with your opinion of it, right? Alright guys, just wanted to give you that little update just so we're up to date on things. Let me know if you're thinking about getting one, if you've gotten one, if you would consider getting one. It's probably not going to be a very popular vid, but just wanted to put it out there. One thing to factor in is the one out of all of these that would potentially be appealing is if they do release one for SIA coin, right? IbeLink does have SIA coin miners, so there's potential that they may release one for it. Right, and keep in mind that that's the only one so far, knock on wood, that Bitmain hasn't messed with. So there may be potential with that one, right? But currently, the way things stand, not looking great for these things, especially for this one, right? If these little mini things is a must for you, I would look at the Cadena one versus this one because it's just not looking too good, or at least wait till after the halving, see what happens, go from there. But again, even it's too much, right? When we look at it, we break it down, we compare it to what's going to happen, we look at the timeline. To me, it just makes zero sense, right? I know it sounds pessimistic. I know it sounds like, oh, he's just negative Nancy, blah, blah, blah. It is what it is, right? Again, I'm just giving you objective numbers, letting you know what it is, letting you know how I feel about it from the perspective of somebody who's looking at profit, right? I know it's not going to do me any favors with getting any review units or anything of that sort, but again, my priority is just to give you my personal feedback and what I'm looking at, right? And the feedback I give you guys or the way I talk about it is if one of my boys were to ask me, this is the honest review I would give them of the unit, right? And that's how I treat all the little reviews. All the things I talk about are coming from that perspective and that perspective only, right? So again, let me know in the comments what you think of this thing. Please comment, like, and subscribe, guys. Thank you for watching, and I am out.